My guest this morning. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
This has been long in coming.
Good morning to our listeners. Yes. I've been held up by a few
yes,
things.
yes.
To our listeners. Yeah.
Because I think we announced this as far back as last month. But
that's
yes,
wrong. Yeah,
yes.
Apologies. Yes.
Yes, but Honorable has been very, very busy. Wonderful to see you this morning.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
I know the U.S. is a place you know very well.
A bit, because I stayed there. I lived there for about a decade. So
you worked there?
Yeah.
For a while. What do you make of
I
what?
worked with the IMF for about 10 years. So.
For 10 years? So you know, at least you have an working understanding of how these things go?
Yes, to a large extent, if you follow. But you can't follow the excitements. Election nights in the U.S. are always, tremendous, and so, yeah.
The interesting part is that the American elections are not determined on popular votes.
No, because they have the Electoral College, which is, let me say, close to what we popularly call proportional representation.
Okay.
And a similar thing also applies to the Senate, the seats in the Senate.
Okay.
And that is the protection of minority states. There's a lot of history behind it. Some say it's the prevention of women and blacks, to vote and others. So, but the long and short of it is, it ends up with, after the elections, there are what you call the delegates.
Okay.
Like a delegate system, for party elections, and So when you have a delegate system, you could have the small states have a proportion of the delegates.
Okay.
So if you win the states, their numbers, and when they
go to you.
Yes, and usually, typically, to California would normally go to the Democrats, and Texas and others would. So those are last states. So usually when the Democrats win their last states and the Republicans win their last states, the election boils down to the delegates in smaller states. That's why we hear names like Wisconsin, Ohio, and others. They are smaller states. And then also there's some of the swing states which normally move. They may be large, they move, Pennsylvania and Florida. And so there's always an eye on that. So it's not a popular vote. So if you take it, for example, Hillary Clinton, if I'm not mistaken, won the popular vote by about 3 million votes.
Okay.
And even Al Gore, when it went to court, won the popular vote. So if you were to compare it to Ghana, Hillary would have been president. And
in this instance,
the polls and things, most people think that Democrats will win the popular vote, but in the U.S., no, it doesn't stand to reason that way.
That's a very interesting system that is very confusing. So I don't understand. The proportional representation thing has always been kind of so.
It's in many parliaments. I think some European parliaments, if I'm not mistaken, I think Germany, Austria, and a few also have proportional representation.
What is your understanding of how it works?
Okay, even if you look at the debates, the debate. Let me take Ghana for example. If you take Parliament, sometimes it comes with nomination.
Okay.
So, and especially with the upper houses, right? So, say 1/3 of the seats will be shared.
Okay.
Right. Irrespective of
1/3 of the seats will be shared. Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah. Equally.
Okay.
On some basis, let's say regional basis or some basis. So, in addition to winning in Parliament, right, you could have, within the region, a certain number of people going, to Parliament as well. Another way it also works is to say that if you cross a threshold, let's say if a presidential candidate crosses a threshold, you know, in a prime ministerial system, if they cross a threshold, then they are entitled to a certain number of seats in parliament. Okay. So if a minority, let's say the one who I would say pulled the most, if I'm in recent memory, is Dr. Indom.
Okay.
If we have proportional representation, if you pull, say, 10%, if you pull 10%, you pull a certain number, then you will have a right to representation.
Okay, in the parliament.
In the parliament.
Okay.
And those are additional seats. You know, and so ordinarily, if you took the popular vote, they would be in parliament. Yeah. So those are so, but the US one is the most pronounced.
My producer is showing me something. It means if I'm confused. They said 238 against 213. They said you need 270 electoral college votes to win the elections.
That's a delegates who are coming. You need to get 270. That's exactly what I'm explaining.
Very
so irrespective of what is
happening in terms of the popular votes.
Popular votes. So, and you see that the numbers will go up first on both sides. Because and they will be about equal, and then the smallest states begin to make a difference.
The Senate is 47-47. The Republicans have lost one. The Democrats have gained one. So 47-47. Very interesting happening in the US. The House is 180 against 171. So the Democrats have gotten 180 votes. They've lost 3. The Republicans have gained 3, which is 171 now. So very, very interesting. But we'll try and see if we can make sense of what is going on there, because I don't know how come in this day and age that's happening in the US. But
the lower chamber in the US is by popular vote.
Okay, so the House is by popular vote.
Yeah, when it comes to
so yeah,
apart from the number of seats that are located in the Senate, the House is by popular vote.
You have to win it based on your strength, the strength of your candidate and the party, wherever you are.
Even then, it's a lot depends also on, you know, what they call the gerrymandering, which is redistricting.
Yes.
You know, which, you know, it's like splitting. It's the same as splitting, let's say, constituencies in Ghana. And depending on how you split it, sometimes, you know, the splitting favors, you know, maybe the NDC favors the MPP.
Okay.
Yeah. Looking at the
so
way
it can be done in a way that will ensure that. Yeah. Okay. Okay. But what do you make of attempts by people to say, compare what happens in the US to what happens in Ghana? Because if you look at it, actually the dynamics have always shown that whenever a Republican is in power, it's most likely for somebody from within the New Patriotic Party to be in power. Do you see any correlation just for, but for that coincidence that has repeated itself for a while?
Okay, the first reason is the Republicans
Oh, no, but I think there's a distance enough between us. If you feel uncomfortable with the face mask, I don't know.
It's fine. It's okay. Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
I hope it's not interfering. But the point I'm making is that if the Republican is a right of center government, market oriented, right? Yeah. Then if you go to, and the Democrats are more of a social Democrats, you know. Then if you go to, say, the UK, the Conservatives are market-oriented. You know, that's a tradition of the party.
Okay.
You know, similarly, if you come to Ghana, you can see where I'm heading, you know, towards. So that's the first reason. So the natural affiliation, you know, for a developing country party that is, you know, market in orientation would be, you know, Republican. So you have maybe MPP following philosophically. Okay. You know, yeah. But out of this, you have international movements, you know, led by the US. So I forget the name. So they come, you know, and the whole conference is left of center. They are affiliated to all the Socialist International and all those, you know, yeah. So there are all these things which, you know, tend to. But also, so because of that, you may look at one party in one respect or the other. But as we said, ordinarily it shouldn't apply to Ghana, because it's about the popular vote. You know, and so
the difference is the popular votes.
Vote. In Ghana, it's a popular vote that determines. It's not, we don't have an electoral college system.
Well, so let's move on. I'm just taking your views on a few things. Recently, I got this, I think it's a memo being circulated by the Ghana Airports Company. and it's titled Appreciation. It says KIA adjudged winner best airport by size and region and the most improved airport in Africa. The Ghana Airports Company Limited presents its compliments to stakeholders. In March 2020, Kotoka International Airport was adjudged best airport by size and region, 2 to 5 million passengers per year, and most improved in Africa by Airports Council International. The award is ACI's recognition of our effort in providing superior customer experience at KIA and represent the highest possible accolade for airport operators around the world. We are proud today to join ACI to celebrate the Virtual Airport Service Quality Customer Experience Week as an ASQ award winner. GACL extends its sincere appreciation to all stakeholders for their tireless efforts in making this happen. We believe this achievement will spur us to work harder together to continuously enhance passenger customer experience at our airports. And of course, they display the awards. I'm asking this because a lot of talk about the Terminal 3 and also the work that has been done at the Kotoka International Airport during that period.
If I want to be a bit cynical, is it the same airport? Which was said to be giving all kinds of names, you know, flooding and doing everything and all that, when we should be focusing on the investment.
It's the same airport.
Is it the same airport?
Was flooded at some point.
Yeah, but is it the same airport? And does it show that, you know, really, does it show that we do have the, it has a potential to be managed, to generate revenues?
Yeah.
Because the scheme we use for that airport is that we never give a sovereign guarantee.
Okay.
And we ring-fence the airport tax based on Terminal 1 and 2 at the time, or Terminal 2 in particular, because which was the international airport at the time, you know, terminal at the time, with some expected flows that will come from Terminal 3. And it was sufficiently large, you know, the flows. Just like infrastructure fund, we'll come to, just like the ESLA, we'll come to that. Sufficient large for the African Development Bank, construction led by African Development Bank, and I believe HSBC and our own Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, you know, to provide a loan on the back of the airport.
Okay.
And it was a model for us, and that's what we're calling part of our smart borrowing, which is self-financing. You know, so for me, this is vindication of a Mahama policy. You know, the foresight that you cannot, if we wanted to put that loan, remember at the time we were thinking through that, you know, expanding the airport at the Terminal 3 because we couldn't go to Pam immediately. We were limited to borrowing $500 million US annually under the IMF program, commercial loan. We could take only up to 500 million.
Okay.
And if you look at the number of, you know, projects that we had to do and the rest, you had to think outside the box. And so we came out with this, you know, and even though it was said that, okay, fine, if you, and I'm explaining the reason for the escrow. Okay. Still, there was an insistence from the World Bank and others that once you back, you know, the airport authority to borrow for the airport, it will be regarded as public debt. Okay. So we said, fine. We said that we are going to pay from the airport tax. Okay. So we created an escrow, and we stopped putting the money in the consolidated fund. And it was in the, you know, so you can show it as a liability as an accountant, but then I'll bring the assets, which I have created, to balance it and then neutralize it. And that's how they became convinced that, you know, yes, it could pay for itself. So the innovation... Now, so that's the innovation. But the point I'm making is that when you come and you take that money, you know, and you divert it to compensation and to other things, you cap it. It was among the resources that were capped, right? You cap it and take, and then the flow is no longer strong. Instead of 100%, it's falls to 60%. You don't blame Mahama. So I hope this will be, you know,
evidence of what it can be used for.
Exactly. It has the potential of this. So I hope that you don't blame Mahama for saying he took an expensive, he took whatever. Because at the time the modeling was done, there was no revenue coming, you know, from Terminal 3, and the expansion, the number of airports, airlines that were flying, you know, latest Qatar and the rest, they were not part of the model, although there was some estimation that was made for it. So this is a vindication of the self-financing, which is the same thing. And I would hope that the self-financing is behind KJTR.
Okay.
Yes, but the way it's being handled, I can say for sure that it's not going to, KJTI is not going to pay for itself, and it will end up being public debt.
The intention was, even the KJTI market had the same model as the Terminal 3.
Yes, because it was part of our self-financing.
You were supposed to...
The loan, in the case of KJTI, the loan was taken already by KJTI.
Okay.
But there were 3 underlying policies.
Okay.
The first, self-financing policy. So there were going to be electronic locks.
Okay.
Which was what we started with Ayalolo. The buses, you remember we started using swiping and, you know, the electronic means of payment. So it's like your phone card. If you load your card, you know, and if you don't go and top it, you can't make your call.
You can't make a call.
So the money won't go physical cash for people. And it was going to be the same for the Takoradi Intercity railway. And then we bring it back to come and reinforce, you know, the Accra Intercity. You know, so it's simple. So you use electronic means. In fact, the same thing was going to be done for, you know, the as part of the Tema interchange at the which has become controversial. It wasn't complete. The expansion of the road that was to take place was to come with the toll plaza, which was to go ahead and you collect, you know, the money electronically. Anyway, so you reinvest the money, right? The commercial project, and it pays for the loan. And so if you have electronic locks and things in KJTI, you can lock them remotely and whatever, the money that will be paid, you know, by those who are renting the vehicles going in can be ring-fenced. That's the first, self-financing. The second was then, you know, and we did this with Honorable Kojo Bonsu and others when they were. The second was that money that has been ring-fenced, right? A proportion only will now come to government. I believe we said 40% because the loan was already on our books to help reduce the public debt. But the 60% was going to be ring-fenced for the municipal bond, which would then be the first step towards issuing municipal bonds. And so we're taking the municipal bond bill to Parliament as stalled. It doesn't mean that. And that would have been used to develop other satellite markets in Kumasi and Ashanti.
Okay.
So, and if that worked, then you come to other regions, to Greater Accra, Secondary Takoradi, and the rest. So that, and even for the small districts, you can, you know, you can use it to develop their small markets and lorry stations and the rest, and it will be self-financing. Because elsewhere, in the US and other places, it's municipal bonds that develops, for example, city roads. It's not central borrowing. Central government provides some support, but it is localized.
So for the sake of clarity, the plan was that the money that was going to be generated from KJTI, you're going to take 40% to the central government.
Yeah, because
you're going to set aside 60%.
Yes.
Was that also going to be put into a new fund?
That's the escrow I was talking about.
Okay.
And so that fund, instead of using the money directly, like the airport tax, which we ring-fence, you use it to issue a municipal city or a metropolitan city, so that the target was a municipal city, together with a portion of the property tax and the rest, and you borrow against it to develop more markets.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it was the
same. So KJTI will be paying for itself, but the essence would go, the flow from KJTI, additional flow from KJTI, and from the new markets will be strong enough to, yes.
But you seem to fear that from the management of the KJTI markets, this whole idea of no material,
I haven't seen accounts being established. I haven't seen the turnstiles and things in place and the rest. So yeah.
So now that goes onto our books as a bond that the central government
it's already on our books.
Okay.
But what it means is that instead of, you know, the whole of the 100% will have to be paid by central government.
The government now have to find
money.
And
then find money if they want to develop other satellite markets. You can't do it on the back of revenue which is being earned, you know, from the locality.
What about the Terminal 3? Because I recall this weekend, the communications officer of your party says that there are even portions of the airport that has been given to groups that have been formed by persons connected to this
government. If it takes money away, I mean, there is, in principle, there's nothing wrong with outsourcing. Okay. One, if it's done transparently, you know, and two, if it doesn't take away money from airport company.
Okay.
Right. In fact, if it rather boosts airport company, because we take it that private sector is more efficient and they will run things, so you wouldn't. So they are looking for their money. The reason private sector is said to be efficient is that if I have a contract as a private entrepreneur, the people I put there to check the weight of bags won't be as compromising as public sector. That's not. I've been a public sector worker. That's not to put down public sector. That's very hard-working public servant. But the pressure, they can resist the pressure that is brought to bear on employees of airport company, which is why there may be a difference between our local airline with all the pressures that come to the managers. It's sometimes not because they are bad managers, but it's because of the political, social, and all the pressures, sometimes family pressures. And that's why how come foreign airlines who come here, they don't have those relationships, or they close their minds to it, even their classmates here and whatever, and they make their money. So there's a sense in which outsourcing can even boost the revenue. That is coming. But Terminal 3, let's also say that, yes, COVID has had an effect. You can't overlook that. The lockdown and closure of the airport and whatever. But the point I'm making is that the structure for financing started to unravel, from the capping of the revenue and from other things. And so the lenders would, the next time, you've not let the model operate the way you said it would. And here now it becomes a nation, not a government. And so it will be difficult to bring back that confidence.
So definitely, from the way things are looking, government would also have to find money to pay for the Terminal 3.
Well, that's if it continues to compromise. Quite apart from what has happened with COVID. But, it's going to, the airport is being opened again, and you can, as President Mahama said, you can go under the force majeure provisions and restructure the loan, and, yes, and it will continue to pay for itself. But if you continue to cap it and take part of the money for other things, maybe presidential initiatives and the rest, then it's not going to happen.
Well, so this is a bigger conversation that we have been having. The direction this government has had as against what you said, what you tried to develop within the limited, because of the IMF program. Because when I was listening to you, I realized that one of the reasons you came up with this smart idea was because you couldn't have borrowed on the books. The IMF was not going to allow you. The World Bank was not.
That was not the primary consideration. Actually, we had these policies in our homegrown policy. Because you see, you had to find a solution to sovereign guarantee. And so, for example, when we developed that, we issued, I believe, 2 sovereign guarantees for the whole of 4 years. Because we were able to set up this. So it was actually, part of the homegrown policy. If you look at it, you will see, that they were models.
So the models were in the
infrastructure fund. Another one is the infrastructure fund. Dubai developed because of the Dubai infrastructure fund. Putting part of their own money and saying this money is just for infrastructure development. And we talk about Norway and other things, so the infrastructure fund is one aspect of a sovereign wealth fund. And then you have, shocks will always come. When I speak, people say that, you are comparing COVID to global financial crisis, for example, to Doomsaw, to whatever. And I said, yes, because COVID is different only in severity. And COVID is different only because it is not coming as a financial, the cost is not financial, the cost is health. But it's a bigger, if the cost is health, there's a bigger form than Ebola. And if we were lucky, unlike, Sierra Leone and the rest, that's why they were better prepared for COVID lockdowns and the rest, because Ebola hit them much harder, and SARS, than it did. And so from our, the crisis we went through, from the global financial crisis, the fall in, crude oil prices, disruption in gas supply from Nigeria. I always mentioned that before I had Doomsaw, because that was the miracles of Doomsaw. They were not on account of non-performance. So if you come to government and you did not expect that there will be a crisis in any form, and you don't put money, you don't add money to the stabilization fund. This is the point I'm making. You don't add money to the stabilization fund. You stop putting money into the infrastructure fund, right? You wanted to take even the stabilization fund today we are talking about, which you 250, which you are depending. Remember, you wanted to take it. I was in this studio, remember, opposing taking it for free SHS. You remember that debate, including the Heritage Fund. right? Where would you have gotten that resources? And if you have put money in, maybe we would have taken 500 or 750 million US dollars, not 250 million, which we put in. From 3 oil fields, we could have done more. And we would have gone to the IMF to borrow less. And that's how countries win themselves of the IMF. That's how they exit the IMF, by developing tools themselves. You know, so if you practice the self-financing model, we were doing it project by project.
Okay.
But now we do a collective. So the infrastructure fund takes over all these commercial projects, right, and pools the resources. So you are no longer looking at, you know, the 200 million US dollars that will come from airport company for 5 years. You are not looking separately at, you know, as we were saying, KGT, you are not looking separately at oil infrastructure. You are pulling it together, all the commercial projects. And therefore, you can go to the market to borrow about 1.2 billion to do infrastructure. And the project will pay for itself. Because if you take the interchange, you know, at the motorway, it was to be linked to the thermal port,
okay,
with a fast lane for cargo to come out and tolled. So the tolling fee would have been part of, similar to how the US and others finance their highways. Everywhere in the US you have tolls.
Is that not what has happened? The link to Temaport and the tolling?
I haven't seen the toll plaza. We are still between cash and the rest. So it means the pilfering of cash and things will
still continue.
Yeah. So you have to, you know. So but the point,
so the plan has not been followed.
Yes. So coming back, the IMF program for us made things worse because of single spine and the rest, and they wanting us to make sure that we had resources, you know, to do the austerity and the rest, right? They limited our commercial borrowing to 500 million. So that provided even more incentive for us to, you know, to fine-tune the policies which we felt, you know. And so that's how come, despite the 500, we were able to do the self-financing, ring-fence them, and we started talking something about net debt, which is no longer in the debt management report, because then we created the assets, the escrows and the rest. Another escrow we created, you know, was actually the oil revenue for Echuabu.
Okay.
I don't know if that has unraveled, but that was to lead to the expansion of the Echuabu plant. Okay. Right. So we would have had a phase 2 of Echuabu by now. And there will be no talk of excess gas. Because we knew that ENI, as Jinapo said just 2 days ago, we knew that ENI was all gas. And then so you need to develop the gas infrastructure. Right. And so you need to husband the ENI gas revenues linked to PSP. Or if you like, the PDS, you know, because the weak link is at the end. So if you have PDS, right, and the money from ECG is not coming because it broke down under the MCC, and there was a warning this morning from MCC, I heard it from the news, don't blame Mahama, right, because the plan has unraveled, you know, with the inability to do the electronic metering and everything that was to be associated with PDS. It wasn't just a name, you know, the PSP. Right. So the point I'm making, you know, if I may, was that similarly, if you ring fence that revenue properly, and remember, if you did electronic meters and the rest, then it's not somebody going to read, and you know, and if you allow somebody to connect illegally, I'm not saying it's complete, but if you allow somebody to connect illegally, sure, you have to go and buy the meter. It's not somebody who is coming to read and lower the amount or illegal connection and the rest. The consumption would have to be paid for, right? And so that money would have been ring-fenced. And the expansion is what would have taken the excess gas, you know, which would have fired, you know, VRA and others, because we were buying crude for VRA at more than $100 per barrel. And that is why these schemes were put in place. So we were preparing for the next crisis. So if you come and you stop it, one, you don't say that your crisis is larger than mine when you didn't prepare for the smaller one. Okay. No, you should have prepared for the second one. And secondly, with 3 oil fields, you could have prepared better.
For COVID?
For COVID. And 3, COVID, I keep insisting, COVID is only 2.5 to 3% of GDP. That is what was sent to Parliament 1, and that is what the basis for going to the IMF for loan. For the IMF loan, the COVID loan, 2.3 to 3%. So one, let's go through the arithmetic, right? And I hope that I'm not sounding too technical. 2020 budget said the deficit was 4.9%, will be 4.9%. let's say 5%.
To simplify the financial sector.
I'm coming to that.
Okay.
It excluded the financial sector. It excluded energy. Right. It excluded them. If you take the media review, see it. It excluded them. I think we spoke about this. So if it's 5%, you are projecting as your deficit. And you go to the IMF and you say that you want a loan and that the cost of COVID on the economy and everything will be 2.5 to 3%. So let's say 3%. Let's be generous. If you add it to 5, what do you get?
2.5 to 5.
You are saying that when you calculated the...
That should be 7.5%.
When you calculated the 5, let's go back. When you calculated 5, there was no COVID.
Okay.
Nobody anticipated COVID or anything.
That was your projected deficit.
That was your deficit without COVID.
Okay.
So and that was 5%. Let's say no 4.95 to make the arrangement. So you go to the fund and you say, oh, COVID has come. When I was preparing the budget, there was no anticipation of COVID. But our estimation of COVID is that it will cost us 2.5 to 3% of GDP. And I'm saying let's take even 3%.
That would be 8.
8%.
So the deficit should have been 8%
exactly
of GDP.
Of GDP. So why are we looking at a deficit of about 15%? Where did the 7% come from? And now that's why I said that has nothing to do with COVID. One, when the IMF adjusted the deficit, the parallel numbers, which as we called it, we started calling it, because we said the deficit was 7. It wasn't, 4.5, the basis for last year, if you add it. So one, the 7% is because one, you left out the energy sector costs, you left out the bailout costs. 2, you underestimated compensation to public servants.
Underestimated compensation to public servants.
I mean, look at the adjustment that was made for the supplementary budget. Those are the items that were adjusted, which I'm talking about. And the underestimated interest payments. And in fact, in the current...
the first quarter.
The first quarter. Those figures are going up because interest by plus compensation was 98.5% of tax revenue. After the media review, it rose to 145%, 143% of GDP, which is why Bank of Ghana had to come in to bail out.
Okay.
Right. And right now it's supposed to have come down slightly to about, but still above 100%. So we are even borrowing to pay interest and compensation. Right. So those adjustments that were made increase the deficit. So that's another source of the deficit. And then the other adjustment that was made was that we underestimated the amount needed to service debt, which you call amortization. So these were the adjustments that accounted for the 7% additional. It's not COVID, and nothing to do with COVID.
I want to come back to the issue of where you are saying they did not prepare, because I recall recently, former President Barack Obama made a tweet where he was talking about that our administration literally left this White House a playbook that would have shown them how to respond before COVID-19 reached our shores. Joe and I revisited it recently, and it was showing the plan that they had in place. And you shared it.
Yes,
this is what you said.
And
from a distance,
eerily familiar. Yes.
From a distance, but there's something eerily familiar with this Obama quote. Are you suggesting that that playbook, you also left sort of a playbook that has
of course,
been thrown aside?
We left the stabilization fund with one oil field. Right? Not much money. I mean, you can go to PIAC. Don't come to me. Even they are now saying that still there's a shortfall, the latest report. But go to PIAC. They tell you that money that should have gone to the stabilization fund was not going. Money that should have gone to the statutory funds, the PRMA funds were not going in. With 3 oil fields, if monies were going in, I insist that we could probably have taken 500 to 700 million US dollars of our own money, to tackle COVID. Okay. If you are prepared for it, the way we were preparing and with one oil field, we had needs, if you remember.
Yeah.
Yes, but we knew 2017, if we won, all these things were going to come, and you can't rule for 4 years without a crisis. So you have to prepare for crisis. The countries that did well during the COVID crisis were those who prepared. Even the U.S., mighty U.S., the U.S. Treasury, I read from Bloomberg, the figure was about 3 trillion, which the Treasury had saved because of the experience with global financial crisis. And that's how they were able to tackle, provide resources immediately for COVID and all those things. And that's what Obama is talking about. But they also had, the rapid disease centers and the rest, which they had put in place because of their experience with SARS and all those things. So they were collaborating with the global community. Right. So next, if not a penny has been put in the infrastructure fund, how can you build the next airport? You can congratulate yourself, on Terminal 3, but how do you build Pram Pram? If you build Pram Pram, we are going to build Pram Pram because we'll bring back those policies, the infrastructure fund.
So the plan was an airport at Pram Pram?
The plan has always been the big airport at Pram Pram. But then you have to show that the airport itself can pay for, the airport can pay for itself.
Okay.
And we demonstrated that, we want to demonstrate that with Terminal 3 and with the other self-financing projects that we're doing. Right. So infrastructure fund, if you are not putting money in it, I say zero was put in it. The money that has been spent today for the hotels and others were one. From the 2014 bond that we did, we put a seed capital of 270 million. We could also have put it into consumption. And I'm glad that the public is now coming to understand that infrastructure matters. But infrastructure matters if you can,
pay for it.
Pay for it. Otherwise, you'll be limited by your sovereign guarantee. You can never go anywhere. Let's not delude ourselves. You'll be limited by your debt to GDP ratio because you can't go to the market to borrow. Okay, so that is it. So nothing was put in the infrastructure fund. We put the $270 million into it. It became even a controversy as to, where the money went and all that, Then the increase in VAT from 15% to 7.5%, because the budget was becoming too consumption-oriented, the whole of that 2.5% increase was to have gone into the infrastructure fund.
Okay.
To complement the oil revenue from the 25%, so apart from the seed capital, 25% of oil revenue, which we started after ADFA, was to go into the infrastructure fund, and then the VAT 2.5%.
We're all going to go into the infrastructure.
All infrastructure fund, because that's the only way you can build the flows. So now you are saying, I have flows coming from my own oil revenue. I have flows coming from VAT, the budget, as part of my capital budget, and I have flows coming from the projects, like airport Terminal 3 itself should have been contributing by now to infrastructure fund, and the other commercial projects. So you build a fund. That's how Dubai fund and that's were built. Right. And so the next time you go and say, I want to build, a new airport, because this one keeps expanding and expanding, you make Accra a city, KIA, a city airport. Many countries have city airports.
Yeah.
For executives and the rest, businessmen who want to come. The cargo and other things, you take it to Pram Pram. But you are now showing that it's not just Terminal 3 that will pay for itself when it comes to Pram Pram. Yep. But in addition to Pram Pram, I have oil revenue coming in, I have VAT coming in, I have, Pram Pram itself bringing revenue. Terminal 3 loan would have been paid down. And that's how you develop. Then, again, let me cite the last example, sinking fund. We started a sinking fund. And when we started a sinking fund, and I'm told there's a graph that's showing that, they're also bringing down debt. No, we'll explain that. But when we started a sinking fund, even with all the infrastructure investments that we were making, the 2019 debt management report, I'm not going to quote, because that report started to be published from 2017. So the first one was 2016 after we left office under the Public Financial Management Act, which we passed. It shows that as a result of this mad borrowing things that I'm talking about, the rate at which we were borrowing started to decline. From 2014, it started to decline. First time after hip peak. And then right from 2017, it started going up again. And from 2018, even without the loans for for the bailout and the rest, it started going up. Right? Why? Because again, the sinking fund wasn't being used for the purpose of bringing down debt. The sinking fund was being used for other things. Okay. Some refinancing, yes. But then it's, if you look at it, what we're doing there, instead of paying, we took off 500 million out of 750 of the Kufuor bond. That's the first sovereign bond. Right? Mm-hmm. At Amaze is no issue sovereign bond. We started with, and we had planned with the Mahama bonds. And we had planned to take off 300 million based on Jubilee alone, 300 million US dollars every month. Sorry, every year.
300 million.
Yes.
Of the loans that you borrowed.
The bonds that we issued. We were going to stop this interest payment only. We were going to pay down the principal as well, like we do with other loans, right? And when we started doing that, the yield on our bonds started to drop. Today the yields are 10%, and when it was at 6%, they were attacking us.
In fact,
right.
I was going to.
So let me finish it also. The rate at which we are borrowing started going up. Why? Because the sinking fund is not being used for the purpose. What we are doing is that we are borrowing to replace the debt. We did part of that. They said, remember, you couldn't borrow to pay debt.
Yeah.
We did part of it, but we put the sinking fund in place. And as a result, we saw that we're going to, we'll be in a position to pay 75% of the bonds that Mahama issued in 10 to 12 years. Today, what we have done, we have picked those bonds, borrowed to pay the original owners, and then push it out 15%, 40 years. 15 years, 40 years. Right? 40 years will come. A consumer dam loan was 40 years when we were borrowing from the World Bank and the rest. But even that, for the dam itself, VRA was putting money aside over all that period, all the period of 30 to 35 years or 40.
To pay the loan?
Yes, it partly paid for the loan. And it's a part of our conviction that, we could do the self-financing. So the VRA money was going straight into the consolidated fund, so we isolated it. Just as for the escrow, for the markets to see it. Yeah. So
that was the plan you left that they have completely ignored. I always ask this question because there have been many times. For example, one of the loans you took on JICA, including the Tema interchange, was supposed to be the Volivo Bridge.
Yes.
Up till now, that has not been touched. And the question I keep asking is, did they know about it?
Yes, and
these things were...
In the Ministry of Finance, you will know about all these things. Because the Ministry of Finance has good records. So you know the stage where we got to everything. I always say that we have fantastic public servants with institutional memory and everything. So they can brief the minister, when it comes on their toes. And now that we are doing handing over notes and the rest.
But you're driving me towards another point, because the same public servants came out in 2017 there about Clocksack saying that your successor has actually replaced those public servants with people he has brought in himself. So could that also account for the fact that then he's unable to keep up with some of the things you left behind?
Well, we can look to the role of some of them in the Special Prosecutor's report.
Very interesting. But I wanted to ask this question because you've gone there. But on the issue of the plan, I think, but there's also, I want one last question.
Let me make a point. As a past public servant, I never had a special assistant because I knew I could depend on.
I wanted to ask that as a specific question, but I just wanted one last issue on the issue of COVID. One of the things people have always gone to has been the hospitals that you have built. The hospitals that you have built, the things, the infrastructure that you put in place and everything. You said all this, but you were also talking about the rapid response aspect.
But remember, we did all these investments and we're still bringing down the rate of borrowing.
Yeah.
Right.
But all these investments were in anticipation because of the Ebola experience that.
But this is again what we call social infrastructure, and again another part of our smart borrowing, principle is that you have become a middle income country. Your access to concessional loans, that's soft loans from the World Bank, African Development Bank, will begin to dwindle. And when we became middle income, our per capita income, which is used to measure, was just slightly above, $1,000, per individual, per capita, if you divide by the population.
Yeah.
And I remember very well, I remember this conversation very well, going to the late vice president, and we're having a conversation, after the rebasing, if you remember, and the first oil exports, and he said, well, Seth, you just hold your excitement. I think I didn't even become, it was then a governor or something. He said, okay, yes, hold hold your excitement. Because let's just wait for the population census to come. Remember the 2010? Yes, so let's wait for that to come because the computation is per capita income. And so what if your population size grows so big that, you know, the denominator influences the numerator, and therefore you drop below 1,000, you will be back to becoming a developing country. Well, it came, but it didn't, and we remained above.
Okay.
By the time we had, with these 3 oil fields, our per capita is 2,000 plus already, US dollars, doubled. So it means that we are not going to become middle income country. Sorry, the developing country.
Okay.
We won't. Because if you expect, you know, the oil fields which have not materialized to have come in the next 2 years, 4 years, or whatever, how long it will take, it means that we are moving gradually towards middle income country. Right? It doesn't matter whether you think it's on paper. It has a reality. It will affect your access to grants. That's the point I'm making.
Okay.
So because of that, another principle, in addition to the self-financing, was that, okay, why don't we use those soft loans for social infrastructure, schools, hospitals, and the rest, which cannot pay for themselves?
Okay.
So allow time to pay, because those ones we are going to pay over a long period of time. And that's how commercial loans must pay for. If the commercial loans don't pay for themselves, they will take space from your social infrastructure loans.
Well, if you just join us, I'm speaking to former Finance Minister Seth Tekper. A lot of what the MPP is going through nowadays, they blame on you. In fact, the issue of the debts when they came up, it looks like one of the things they are saying whenever you say it is that you don't expect the debts that the NDC left behind to pay for themselves. Somebody definitely has to pay for it, and that's why we are borrowing to pay for those debts.
Did we pay for Kufuor's, loans? Did we pay for Rawlings' loans? And if you take it that it was during the, I believe, Mills era that we finished paying for the Kosomo Dam, were we paying for Bui Dam, the portion that was taken by Professor His Excellency Kufuor?
Yeah.
Were we paying for the infrastructure? Because President Kufuor did some infrastructure as well. Were we paying for those loans? I mean, come on, every government pays for. And the question therefore, are they going to finish paying for the loans they are taking 77% before they leave office? Or they will just, or NDC coming to power will take over those loans? No, I mean, we shouldn't be buying those kind of arguments. I also hear the foreign exchange argument. Didn't they say they were going to hold the cedi constant? Right? Didn't they say 1-to-1 was going to come back? Why are you blaming the depreciation of the cedi, which is affecting the foreign component of the debt, on Mahama now? If your policy is failing. So yeah, I hear all those reasons, which they gave. And then they blame us for the bailout costs and the energy sector.
Yes. Two areas that they blame you for. They said that is a management of 2 messes you left behind. That's costing the country.
Well, if you Google, you can let your staff Google. They received the prize for ESLA in 2017. If ESLA were that bad, would the country receive a prize for it? Please, you can ask your staff to Google. And I can tell the public today that every penny of the energy arrears, some road arrears, and the bailout cost is being paid from ESLA.
Every penny?
Every penny.
And then
unless it's diverted.
Okay.
Right? Unless ESLA money, like maybe airport company or the rest, is diverted. Then in that case, don't come and blame Mahama. And let me explain. Their own, I believe I have the table here. I'm saying every penny, okay, let's say every penny ought to come from ESLA.
You believe ESLA could have afforded to pay for all those?
Of course. This is the ESLA report. I left my glasses, but I can still see. ESLA came in 2015.
Okay.
Late 2015. Okay. By 2016, ESLA brought in 3.3 billion.
3.3 billion
Ghana cedis. 2017, 3.6 billion Ghana cedis. 2018, 3.5 billion Ghana cedis. 2019, round off 4 billion. If you can add, those up to because those are actuals.
It's 9, 14.
Let's say 3.5, that's 7, plus another 3.5, 10.5, plus 4.
14.4.
14.4.
14.4 billion.
Yes. Projection. Based on current update, 2020 is supposed to bring in 4.5 billion. Remember they increased the ESLA, the nuisance tax, the levy. It's supposed to bring in 4.5 billion.
That should make it 18.9.
2021 is bringing in 5 billion. 4.95, so 5 billion.
Okay.
2022 is supposed to bring in 5.4 billion. This is the projection for ESLA. 2023 is supposed to bring in 5.9 billion. That's 6 billion. 2024 is supposed to bring in 6.4 billion. Total over the period 41.5 billion. This is the strength of ESLA. Let me make 3 points. We use the first flows of ESLA, 250 million Ghana cedis only out of 300 million. We are not talking billions. 250 million Ghana cedis
out of
March 2016. You can Google it. And we ring-fence the VRA debt that came from Dumso, 2.2 billion.
Okay.
Ghana cedis. And we called the banks from whom VRA had borrowed. And we said, this is the strength of ESLA. We believe that in 3 to 5 years, all the VRA debt will be paid from ESLA. So we did the first restructuring loan of 2. And the banks took over, the Ministry of Finance took over the loan. We established an escrow, which is the antecedent for ESLA PLC.
Okay.
Because we said we are not going to do, we will do the escrow, but we won't do a PLC.
Okay.
Because it will be quasi, liability. Right? Okay. The total debt at the time for the energy sector was about 2.3 or 2.2 or 3 billion US dollars.
Okay.
If you multiply by even 4 at the time, and by 4, that's about 16 billion.
Okay.
That's why we did that, the portion of the VRA debt, right? We did it for a loan of 3 to 5 years only. Which 2016 would have been 2021 next year. That loan would have been repaid. We had a second term sheet for 600 million US dollars, which would have been paid also to the IPPs. That term sheet was never implemented. The VRA one was refinanced. Instead of paying it down, it was thrown out. So that debt is not being paid out. 2017 budget, despite these flows, and despite flow from 2017 and 2018, the 2017 budget did not have any estimate. You can check, go to the appendix. No estimate for energy sector.
In relation to ESLA, I think you're responding to my question. That specific question of why should you not be blamed for the banking sector issues and also the energy sector issues that they say they are paying for?
Yes, let me wind on that discussion by saying that at the same time that we were doing the VRA debt restructuring and the rest, my colleague Honorable Fuseni was also restructuring the debt owed by contractors.
Inusa Fuseni?
Yes, as it has the energy sector, it has an enhanced road levy element, the ESLA.
Okay.
So that was also being used to ring fence the arrears on the road sector. On the road sector, that contractors owe to banks. And so we're also having negotiations with the same banks to ring fence the ESLA to settle that. And the contractors were cooperating. Because why? Because if I've gone to the bank, to borrow from the bank, and government is taking over that debt, that is loan which I took to come and do roads. And government says, let me take it over, put them in a pool, right? And then use ESLA to pay. And the business of the bank is to lend, sometimes for the same duration, right? So over a longer period. So that was also ongoing. So wherever you look at the arrears, the so-called 10 billion they said we left at it. Remember they said we left 10 billion arrears
in the road sector.
In the road sector. Could have been settled, from ESLA if we had acted quickly. But those were even includes roads that were to be completed. Most roads are multi-year. Yeah. Yes. And they include some of the rural roads, apart from the cocoa one that was being financed from. So I'm saying that there was enough resources. You can see from this, from the table which is from the 2020 report in relation to 2019 and the projections from the ESLA report, which is statutory, that they should have been paid. And I listened to the interview they did on the energy sector, and debt and all those. And there was also the mention of ESLA, which is a nuisance tax. But they created the impression that they had to borrow to pay those. Fine. Granted that you went to borrow, then what happened to this money? Were they diverted? Then you should account to Ghanaians as to how you use the ESLA.
You're using the ESLA.
And how you came to even extend it beyond the 5 years, which should have been 2020, 2021, for another, from this estimation alone to 2025, 2024, 25. And bonds that you have done for 10 years, which means that you are implicitly, extending even the ESLA levy. That was a levy you said you would take off, a nuisance tax. And that's the source of, the money, which is being used to pay the depositors. And I don't know if it to be enough because they are going through the ESLA bond and the bond is not performing too well. So I don't think we in the NDC should take the blame. Now, when you talk about the health of the economy and the fact that we also left debt, as I said, every government leaves debt. If I leave debt at 57% of GDP and you increase to 77% projected to the end of the year, or 63% at the end of 2019, excuse me, it's supposed to go to 77%. As we speak, probably it's close to 70%. And that was before the 3 months thing that was done, which shows that they are going to borrow, which was passed yesterday. Yeah. Right? Even if you take half of the amount, that is being borrowed as new money to support the budget, right? It means you are borrowing. Yeah. And that borrow is more than 3%. So it means our debt by first quarter, when NDC takes over, is going to be more than 80%.
80% to GDP. 80%.
Technically, you can say at the end of, if the estimates are right, at the end of 2020, it will be 70. It will be 77%. But even if we win and we take over, I'm saying that we also have to manage this, because we'll be borrowing before we can begin to bring the debt back under control as we did, previously, or we're bringing it under control. Those borrowings immediately in the first quarter, as they are establishing, will take the debt to 80%. So we are not inheriting even 77%. You are inheriting debt in excess of 80%.
80%.
Yes.
That will put the economy in a much worse state, and it will be difficult to run that. Will that not?
Is it a HIPIC story? Is it a potential HIPIC story? If I may qualify. Again, why blame, my boss for using the term? Because remember, you're a middle income country. And under the new basis, by bringing the debt to 57% before we left office, we were within the middle income average borrowing, which would, together with the sinking fund, is what will strengthen your presence on the market, because that is supposed to be 55 to 60%.
Okay.
So we are achieving our results. You come and balloon it. You want to blame the NDC. In addition to we have those numbers. In addition to you benefiting from 56.4% of all oil revenues that have flowed into the economy from 2011. In 3 years, yes, in 3 years, the current administration has earned 56.4% 1.4% of all the oil revenues, which is larger than Mills Mahama put together if you deduct from 100 for 8 years. And that is on account of Sankofa and 10 revenues from both gas and crude oil flowing to only this administration.
So there are bigger questions of management rather than the issue of simply saying.
Of course, yes. All I'm saying is I'm telling the public that these things don't, and I think we should begin to respond with some of this. We've been responding, but of course they keep insisting and confusing the public, right? So if you put Mills and Mahama together, even if you want to be generous and you say we started earning oil revenues from 2011 and therefore it's 6 years of Mills Mahama put together. For 6 years, within 3 years, they have earned more than, and remember this is 3 years to the end of 20, so by the end, or in some of the computations, 3.5 years. So by the end of the year, they would have probably increased this ratio because Mills Mahama are not going to earn any more. They are not in government. So probably this ratio will tend to 60 to 40.
For them?
Yes. Because oil prices have started rebounding. At 45 to 42 to 45, US dollars, which is what we earned, the average we earned in 2015 and 2016 before we left office as a result of the fall in crude oil prices with one oil field. So they are the same average, but now with 3 oil fields. And you keep blaming President Mahama.
I was going to read to you what the Vice President said. The Vice President is saying that, well, you accumulated debt. He said between you added debt to the tune of, he said you increased the debt by over 200%. They have done it by 70%. That shows that they are managing it better. That is his response.
When he does that, let me inform the public, when he does that, he is still holding the foreign exchange rate constant at 2008. This is what he has been doing all these years. I'm sorry to say that. That's what His Excellency, to use his title, that's what he's been doing. He holds the exchange rate constant. He's fixated on the impressive 1-on-1. And by the way, that 1-on-1 exchange rate that was achieved as a result of the redenomination brought down the exchange rate from 12 I believe it's $12, 12 Ghana cedis to the dollar, to 1 Ghana cedi to the dollar. So no, it can be. And in any event, I'll refer him to their own debt management report, which shows that they never reduce the rate of borrowing.
They've never reduced, because I've seen 4 graphs that seems to be saying.
I would like to see the graphs and the numbers that they use, because their own graph in the debt management, if you look at my tweet, I've been reproducing the graph in the debt management report, which shows that they never reduced the nominal. We never borrowed more nominal than they did, let alone, in terms of the debt to GDP. You can see from, from the graphs, which is based on the debt management report, which the technical people, computed, not on, that the rate of borrowing, was going down, and it started going up, with the administration, with the current administration. So no, I don't think it's true. And I bet I would look at those graphs, and then see whether we can.
One other thing that has been introduced is the issue of them saying that there's something called capacity charges from the energy sector that's actually affecting, that has created a debt situation.
All those things they are talking about has existed ever since we started buying, ever since we started producing, ever since we, so why are you confusing the public with all this? Capacity charges have always been paid. I think Honorable Jinapor, explained this, very well. With they leave the official records with official, I don't have the table, with official data from ECG, to explain that what that thing they're saying is also not true.
The quote from Dr. Baumia that I was looking for says, when you look at the rate of growth of Ghana's debt stock from 2008 to date, the debt stock growth is the slowest under the MPP. From 2008 to 2012.
Can you pause there? Okay, I didn't even see the quote.
Okay.
From 2000, it starts from
to
what?
Date.
Wait a minute. So from 2008
to date,
we have done 2 rebasing.
Okay.
Remember, we did 2 rebasing.
Okay, you did one, and they have done.
They've done one. When we did ours, together with oil, the GDP grew by 60%.
Okay.
Right. When they did theirs, it increased by 25%. That is 25% on top of 1.6. So we grant them that, GDP has since grown, since 2008. Right, since 2008, because the rebasing was done in 2010.
Okay.
Why is he not going back to use the rebasing which started from 2006? Because remember when we say that, it was our rebasing and it was the Mills administration that brought Ghana into middle income. They are quick to say that no, if you take the rebasing from 2006, then they brought Ghana into middle income status in 2008. Why is he not using 2006? Why is he using 2008? Because the rebasing we did in 2008 goes back to 2006. So why ignore the rebasing and hold, you see the point I was making, hold the CD constant, which was actually in 2007 when the redenomination was made. Right? So that is how come he gets it. So you hold the nominal, which is not deflated by rebasing and by inflation and everything constant.
And just do additions.
And then just do additions.
Very interesting. Because he put it at 243% and 267%. So to 243% be 2000.
Is there any surprise that our debt to GDP ratio is 77%? If that is the basis on which you are calculating the rate of growth of the debt. And I'm saying that this is, you can Google, I don't have the debt management report, but if you Google, you see it there. I think page 50 or so, you see the rate of decline. The official report that was issued. Why wasn't that put, in the debt management report? That would have, simply because that would have ridiculed the government.
Well, I was going to ask one question about the financial sector, because you were talking about the financial sector, but did you anticipate the collapse of, let's say, the spine of the local financial sector?
You see, if we have this, the answer is there. Remember, I told you that we did the restructuring. We did our first restructuring of the banking sector debts. First point. Second point, we did the asset quality review report, what you call the audits. We did it, which was a basis for ESLA. Because at the time, remember, crude oil prices had fallen. Right, and therefore, because the price had fallen, we thought if we put a little money on levy on the price that has fallen, it won't have too much an impact, and that's why we were keen to take it off in 3 to 5 years. Now, third, the prescription to bring banks down is among recommendations that are given to government, following from the global financial crisis. But when Lehman Brothers failed in the US and they stopped making Bank of America and others fail, when Royal Bank, were almost collapsed, and they saw the impact it could have on an economy, many countries stopped collapsing banks. But you take the malfeasance, if there is any, and you deal with it. That was the model we were following, which is why, if the banks were going to collapse, the VRA debt, which did it lead to any banks collapse? Did it lead to, workers losing their depositors, losing their money, workers losing their jobs and whatever? So we made a conscious effort that we're not going to bring down any debt, any bank, because we also had the experience of the non-performing assets recovery trust. We had the experience of BCCI. You saw the pain it brought those who are old enough. It wasn't a Ghanaian phenomenon, right? So we decided to deal with the malfeasance separately from, saving the bank, because the bank is an entity. So no, it's not true. So yes, I would say that we envisage that if you went through the big bang, the experience is there in the US and everybody to show you the consequences, which is why they stopped. So yes, and that is, I would say that we anticipated it, but that's the reason we didn't do it. We were under pressure to do it as a government. That's the reason we didn't do it. So they should own up. It's a policy choice that they made, and they should own up and take responsibility for it. Because you had ESLA, which you could have used, to settle the liabilities and the rest, and then dealt with the Mofisans separately, as they are doing now, because they are ending up using ESLA to do the same thing anyway. So I'm saying that we did the first restructuring. So if you want any evidence that we knew but we didn't go that route, it's there. It's good that we did the first restructuring.
So to you, it was a decision that they made. They need to face that.
I'm saying that it was an option. It was an option that the NDC did not implement. It was an option. So it's a conscious decision that was made.
There are. I wanted to still on the issue of some of the things the vice president has been.
No, by the way, just a minute. Yes, we'll come to the vice president on the banking sector.
Okay.
There isn't a single policy. There's no single policy. If you look at the vulnerability of banks and you look at, and I don't want to be mentioning names, but if I categorize, you can see that some banks, even as of yesterday, right, benefited from you remember the trust that was said, Ghana Amalgamated Trust.
Yeah.
So whilst some were being collapsed, some were benefiting through government guarantee. The state-owned banks, right, we borrowed sovereign bond and the rest, to keep them afloat. Government is the shareholder. Why didn't the government generate the revenue to put the money into it? Right. Thirdly, some were giving, direct support. So their policy is not even uniform. It's not uniform. If it were applied uniformly, more banks could have collapsed.
Well, let me, like I was saying, I was coming to the vice president because he's been talking about your economic management record, and he says that evidence of the fact that they've done fantastically well in managing the economy is in the fact that during COVID, they are able to provide us free electricity at some point and then free water.
From a loan. From a COVID loan. It wasn't money they generated. It came from the COVID loan. It came from the World Bank loan. And when we were under the IMF program and we had crude oil prices falling and everything, we were made to go to the market to borrow. We didn't have luxury from the fund. If we had that luxury, we would have gone. Which finance minister wouldn't persuade his president to go for 1 billion concessional loan for a crisis? Right? So if we had that option, if the fund had opened that option to us, even we were even denied. We were denied even Bank of Ghana financing 5%. And when we say this, people say, why didn't you go ahead? And that is because the reason we went to the fund itself was because budget support was being withdrawn. So immediately you define that, conditionality, budget support will be withdrawn. So we didn't have that luxury. So yes, the vice president can boast with all those things. But he's reminded that he exited the IMF, rushed to the IMF to take a loan and boasting on the back of loans. Because 1 billion US dollars, if you add the World Bank and others 1.5, even a 1 billion alone at an exchange rate of 5.5, it's 5.5 billion Ghana cedis adding to the debt. So no smiles at all. We are going to pay that loan. It's part of the debt stock.
So it cannot be because of their superior economic.
No. It's nothing to do with superior economic, management. If we had that option, we would also have gone for the loan under the fund program. And this is why we often say that the fund itself should be circumspect. Particularly when they come up to defend, some of the things that are, being said.
Let me on that particular story that I was just reading.
Well, the other one is inflation.
Okay.
Like the rebasing, the inflation basket was changed in 2018.
The inflation basket was even rebased.
It was rebased. And so this impressive inflation records that are being pointed has nothing to do with the basis that was being used when we were in power. It has nothing to do with the basis from 2017 to 2018 under their own administration. So the decline is due to the rebasing, putting in more services, and other because the service sector is expanding just like the GDP. So the basket is no longer just dominantly food, because we are spending on data, we are spending on, so if you are going to measure the cost of the prices, for many young people, for many middle income, for many of us who are on Facebook and all those things, the price of data has become more important. And sometimes it's a reality, because you could be buying data and be on your end and forget to go and buy Orange or Coffee Brookman, because you want to remain connected. So it means that you balance, as the economy changes, you balance, what goes into measuring inflation, because the price of data has become a very important factor in determining inflation. So when you make these adjustments, you no longer assume that it is only food, and food index goes up during the dry season. During the rainy season, it comes down, and we are in the rainy season. So obviously food indexes have gone down. But I'm saying that the basic important thing is that the basis was changed in 2018, and you are comparing a new basis to, an old basis, which was maybe 1980s basis. Just as the vice president starts from 2008 basis, after 2 rebasing, and you compare it to debt nominal, when the GDP has changed.
The words you are not using it, because I get a sense that you are sort of saying that the vice president is being misleading and dishonest in his analysis.
I'm leaving that to the public to judge for themselves.
But anyway, I'm going to read this quote to you, because it's at the heart of the way the vice president has spoken.
Another one. Okay.
Yes, and his assessment of how he sees things. And but he says, if you look at how we have managed our debt stock, you will know that we have reprofiled our debt stock, and it is now no more longer
reprofiling is the word they use to substitute refinancing, because when we did the first refinancing, the first major refinancing was done under President Mahama. Let me remind Ghanaians, the entire 2015 bond that we did, not a penny went into budget support. The entire 2015 bond went into refinancing. And at the time, the gurus in parliament looked me in the face and said, and they're my friends, so I don't want to be mentioning, that you don't borrow. You don't borrow to pay debts, even if you are reprofiling it. That's what we were told. And I said, I'm sorry, I am reprofiling, or to use their word, or refinancing, so that I can support it. When we did our refinancing, this is the difference. We supported it with a sinking fund, and that's how the rate of borrowing came down. When they did their reprofiling and push it out 40 years, right, and push it out 15 years, 40 years, they are paying only interest. And the result is that we are using 143%, of GDP, to pay interest. Something we had brought down to, excuse me. I think I don't want to use a figure which will be capitalized on, because I have a figure.
You want to be specific with the figures? Yeah. So,
I believe it's about 44%. We brought it down to about 44%. Today is above 100%. So if the reprofiling works so well, so bit of tax revenue, how come the ratios have changed, so much?
So about 100% of tax revenue.
Interest payment.
Okay.
By the time we were leaving office, 2016, we were using 41.4%.
41.4% of what?
Of tax revenue.
Okay.
To pay interest. Today, we are using an estimated, I believe 50, the new figures that have come out is about 50-something%. And if you add it to compensation, at the end of 2016, when we were leaving office, if you add the 41 to 54, which we had brought down from about 70%, right, it's about That was the West during the crunch and the crisis itself. That was 1995. Today, and then it was because the rates were going down, it started going down gradually. Today we are at 140%, those two items. So what is the superior record that we're talking about? You know, what is superior record? You know, if you did effective rate profiling as we did and brought down this and we started paying down the debt, how come your ratio is higher than ours?
Because the quote I was reading, I didn't even finish. Because it continues and says it is a much better managed debt stock than before. Under NDC,
the debt stock at 77% is better than 57%. And it's from their own debt management report. The vice president is telling us that a debt stock which is going to end at 77% ended even at 60%, 63% is better than a debt stock at 57%. You see how you can just use rhetoric without the numbers. Why didn't you show the numbers to support it?
And then let me end the quotes, because this is the part that is under the NDC. You see that the management of the economy, including the debts, led to a deterioration of the fundamentals.
What fundamentals are we talking? When you talk about the fundamentals, he gave a lecture and gave the fundamentals. One, debt. Your first basic fundamental is debt accumulation. 57% compared to 77% where they are going to hold. The second one is the deficit. Even after they added the interest, which was paid in January to our 2016, January 2017 to our 2016, they have recently revised and they've accepted that our debt was our deficit was 6.3%. The fundamental of 6.3% is better. Is far better than. It's worse than 15% deficit. More than twice. No, I'm sorry. The rate of at which we accumulate revenues is better, far better than theirs. So what fundamentals are you talking about? I didn't monitor this because I was traveling or something. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's very interesting, and also he goes on to lay claim to a few of your. He talks about the fact that they did a Tema interchange. They are doing Obechebi interchange.
Well, the public is already passing judgment on that, so I don't have to. Yes.
You don't have to respond to
that. Because as I was saying a moment ago, it's the MPS project, which is also self-financing. Actually, it's one of the major self-financing. Just as we took the airport tax, we took the harbor fees and ring-fenced it. And that our current chairman, he was there, the chairman of the board. Chairman of the party was there, the chairman of the board, with Ray Anamu. And that is what is underwriting. That's why it's not on public debt. That's what is underwriting the port expansion. And if you combine it with the soft loan and things which we were negotiating, and then the expansion of the to 3 lanes on each side, 3 or 4 lanes, the motorway, and then the toll plaza. So yes, so the story is there.
I said I was going to ask you a few questions. The first one is, when you were going to the finance ministry, did you carry anybody along?
No.
And appoint them to any directorship positions at the finance ministry?
I started my career in the Ministry of Finance. That's where I started my career, actually, as a national service. I was the National Revenue Secretariat.
At the Ministry of Finance then?
Yes. Working with the Honorable Atu Ahoy. Pakwesi, the late Salome and the rest, those were the people, yes. And I work on the Structural Adjustment Program Secretariat, where I had insight into all of the, and then I was appointed a VAT coordinator, which is today part of GRA, as the coordinator, and then became the first deputy minister before I left the country. So by the time I was coming back, frankly, I knew most of the people who were in directorship and other positions, and I knew I could rely on them to do a good job. So no, I didn't have a special assistant.
And did they do a good job with you?
They did a good job. But the record is there. From debt management to the GIFM, the Ghana Fixed Income Market, which is, from their own report, is now one of the best, in Africa, which we are going to extend to corporate bonds and the rest, initiatives like ESLA and the rest. Yeah, so they did a good job in guiding. At least the economy we left with their help is not the help of public servants alone. You know, it's not, I just showed you the records. It doesn't mean that we didn't use experts. No, we use experts. We use experts. For example, when it came to bonds and the rest, right, we use experts. We used Sanchat, we used Stanbic, we used, you know, together with their foreign affiliates. You know, yeah, so we did use experts. But to say personally, no, I didn't have, you know, any assistant or expert coming.
So how did you feel when you heard, I don't know if you did listen to Clocksack make several complaints that the situation had changed, that private people had been...
No, I followed it both as a former public servant. Because I'm aspiring, every public servant aspires. The highest you can go, which is only one position anyway, is the chief director.
Okay.
But you can aspire to the directorships.
Okay.
In ministries and yes. And then in the SOEs and others, yeah. So yeah, so I understood where Clocksack was coming from.
What?
Sometimes we got consultants. We pay for consultants, but they work with the public servants. They did not occupy permanent positions, no. But I don't fine. I mean, the position is open. If you made it open and competitive, Ghanaians have the right to come in. And I believe when the position was changed to chief directorship, we had some people coming from private sector, back then coming in, but it was competitive.
So the question perhaps is how he made those appointments, how those appointments were made, whether through a competitive process or...
I think Clocksack has made a case for itself. So.
But should that worry everyone?
Ghana is a country of laws. You know, so I mean that's what I have to say. I think the Supreme Court ruled recently that you can't also move public servants and things, you know, for certain positions, because the Constitution protects them.
Another issue that I believe, because I know I have to let you go, because the other issue is what you're making of the new turn in the whole Japan matter. The point of Martin Amidu's corruption risk analysis. What do you make of what you are reading from?
You put the personality aside. It's what I always try to do.
Okay.
And look at
the special.
I myself have written about the tax haven.
Okay.
I think I was among the first who said that the tax haven, you know, will make matters worse for anti-money laundering. You know, and Martin is saying the same thing, which I'm not surprised. He's been an attorney general and he knows work with the FIC, you know, and yeah. So I made a point. I made the point about the, you know, not knowing the structure. I listened to my good friend, the chairman of the finance committee, you know, saying that I'm sorry, when you do, you know, I've been to that committee, you know, and I know he does a good job because he was on the committee when I was minister. You know, I know, yes, he's a professional. But I'm saying on one point that, you know, when something is done within 48 hours and you don't have the records which were released on the internet, then that is the benefit of the doubt for the thing to come back. But, for you to review.
But he was also making the point that it is not for them to do an assessment of the portions that had to do with who had given transaction advice or whatever for the deal to come through. They were supposed to assess what was before them and then pass it.
It's part of the utilization of funds.
And the finance committee is supposed to deal with this issue.
When you go to finance committee, you have to tell them how you are going to use the money, and part of the money goes to pay those fees. And in that case, this is money being paid from our royalties. This is money being paid from the Ministry of Finance. So where is it in the Appropriation Act? It's only Parliament that has to pass, you know, the law with respect to that. So even if you put it aside in terms of, you know, that, where is it in the Appropriation Act? You know, but we go for the use of funds, and you have to specify. And who benefits from it? And in fact, the transactions advisors, Parliament gives approval. The reason they are asking for the permission now, I did it. You know, we went to our cabinet as part of the 2016 media review, because we couldn't do the budget or one of the statements, and we asked for permission of Parliament to appoint the advisors, to extend the tenure of the advisors for 2016 into 2017. Because if you don't do that and you attach it to the permission to borrow for 2017, it delays. So we started the appointment, ahead, so that by the time you get the permission, you already have the permission. So we even help you to be packaging, all the things, to be working on many of the things. Yes. So we started that. So which they benefited from in 2017. So, and all those things are approved by Parliament. If I may remind the Honorable Chairman.
So the portion where he's basically saying that who becomes a transaction advisor, how much is paid them, is for the PPA to do and not for them to do. That you do not. That has not been. That was not the practice.
The law was passed by Parliament, and so it's up to Parliament to ensure that its law is being applied.
So Parliament had to approve the transaction advisors.
Parliament gives approval for using money to appoint the transaction advisors.
Okay.
And because of that, that's one element. But even if I have to do the search, is right. Even I have to do a tender, because it's an appointment, it's a purchase of services, right? And that's the responsibility of PPA, right? The Parliament passed the PPA Act, and so Parliament should make sure that whatever is coming to them conforms to the Act. Yes.
Well, what about the portion where they are talking about the fact that the Deputy Minister of Finance actually did sign the whole arrangement?
I've not read that portion of the report, but I think it was pointing to conflict. It's from the Public Financial Management Act, which we passed to streamline a lot of these things and to add clarity. And they did the regulations. Yeah. So what Honorable Martin is talking about is the fact that some of those the role of the spending officer, which is the chief director, was set aside. Yes, because there is the spending officer is under strict. That's why the Auditor General, who is on leave now, started sanctioning some of those officers under those acts. Yeah, you are held accountable for certain things.
So it was you agree that with that particular aspect, that was the duty of the chief director.
Well, I had a response that said that the minister had a right to appoint, and therefore he could appoint the deputy minister. But I haven't, as I said, I have not, covered that part of the.
But based on your own reading of the law, is the minister allowed to appoint who becomes the spending officer?
I'm saying I have to look at the law. I want to be very careful in this because I've seen a response also coming, which I believe in the minister's response that the rendition of the act, and I don't have it here, is that the minister can appoint in that instance. But I'm saying when it comes to many transactions now, is the spending of the chief director, the chief directors, not just Minister of Finance, have a very, very significant role to play. Yes.
There's an aspect where earlier on in the debate.
Yeah, but in any case, even in the procedural way of doing things, it's difficult to set the chief director aside because you have technical people working on various, even if it's consultants. It goes to the desk officer, then it climbs and it goes through. And a normal procedure, if it has been set aside, is that all of those go to the chief director. And then the chief director is the one, there are certain things he can do on behalf of the minister by law and practice. There are certain things which, for example, let me give you an example. The approval of work done. Right, there are limits. So there's an amount, a limit, which the chief director can sign. There's a limit which a deputy minister can sign, and there's a limit which only the minister can sign. Right. So I'm saying ordinarily most things would have gone to the chief director anyway. So if he's talking about setting the chief director aside and sidestepping him, then it means that probably the routine did not even go to the as is convention, you don't go through the chief director.
Dr. Mark, the chairman of the Finance Committee, has described it as social commentary, the risk assessment the special prosecutor has done. From reading it, do you get that sense? Because he said it's an issue of numbers that the special prosecutor does not understand. You are a numbers person. Does that do you think there's a portion of it that is social commentary?
Again, look at the expertise. Remember when it was said that the Mills administration also considered the gold transaction. What was the opinion that stopped it? Or was going to be used for a review of the whole transaction, it was an Attorney General's opinion.
Okay.
Who issued it? It was Martin, Honorable Martin Amidu.
Okay.
Yeah. So he must have some insight, even from his days. So sometimes I think that, a certain modesty is required, in making certain that. So I don't think it was just running a social commentary. I'll give him that benefit. I've worked with him. I worked with him as a deputy. Yeah.
Well,
I worked with him as a deputy. Despite things that has happened and everything, and saga and America and everything. No. Professionally, yes, I did work with him.
The PPA was under you, was it not? Public Procurement Authority.
Yes,
when you were finance
minister. Yes.
So I'm assuming that you.
But it has a board. It has
a board.
Yes.
But I'm assuming that as the former Minister of Finance, if you heard some of the things you are hearing about the PPA boss and the things he's supposed to have done, that's a huge worry, is it not?
Remember that we had some issues also coming up. Every government has issues related to purchasing. Let's face the fact.
Okay.
And but that's the reason we revamped. And Honorable Salas Mensah, he was the head of PPA, if you remember. Okay. We revamped the PPA Act to take some of those, like we did with many public financial money, the tax laws and everything. So yes, but those are some of the reasons we had to look at it critically and revamp it. And also streamline some processes, as we were just saying, under the Public Financial Management Act, which consolidated public financial management practice in the country.
There are those who are saying that if you are losing the aspect of public procurement, then you are losing the fight against corruption. You agree?
It's not just fight against corruption. If you are losing it, right, it can go through the right procedures. You are losing money as a Minister for Finance, because most of the money coming into the kitty is about procurement. Most of the use of tax revenue is under procurement and what we call the entity committees. That is the committees that are supposed to have oversight and make sure that, yes, there is value for money and all that. And it's one of the major preoccupations of the Auditor General. And by the way, when we mention the Auditor General, we mustn't lose sight of the work that is done by the internal audit agency.
Okay.
And we're working to strengthen that as well before we left office. And it's something that, God willing, the NDC will have to do, or will do. Because the internal audit agency, the function, you see, we can put it in ex ante and then what? Post ante. Right. The internal audit agency is there. Their staff are there. And they normally look at the transaction as it's going through the processes. So if they were working, for example, they would have checked some of these processes before they even become officers for the Auditor General to come in. So they have a very vital and important role. The issue is about the role of the agency and its positioning. Right, that's the main issue which is affecting, yes, its effectiveness. So we were working, very hard to try, whilst ultimately they can also be responsible to the higher authorities, Parliament, to the President, and because they are internal, right? Their work in relation to mostly financial. They can do some non-financial performance audits and the rest. Has to do with disbursements of funds, and therefore the issue was whether operationally, they could come under some reporting guidance from the Ministry of Finance. In other words, so that you can have what you call your management committees and things with them, because it is your money that is being spent, and it is your officers. So if you strengthen it, then many of these things, would be. And I think it's something that we have to do. We would definitely, continue with that work.
There's a lot of talk about the direction of this government and what people see as a focus on consumption that's affecting the development of infrastructure, and their insistence that they have managed the economy better than you.
Why are we talking about infrastructure now? Well, why are we having a tall list of infrastructure which is ordinary from the budget and not from the loans that we're taking? When we talk about infrastructure predominantly, we were talking about how we use the loans.
Okay.
You remember?
Yes.
Yeah. you know, and so Ghanaians are passing judgment that we want development.
The CDD actually said it's the number one need of Ghanaians going into the election.
So it vindicates President Mahama. Remember the expression, we don't eat infrastructure?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, which was used like today, sharing money, you know, for votes and the rest. But and they said, yeah. So I think that I like the perception that is coming from Ghana, or the understanding that is coming from Ghanaians, that if you want development, it's not about 500 cedis which I will give you, you know, to go and buy, you know, food. It's about, if I did your roads, most Ghanaians don't want to come and beg. Most Ghanaians want you to do access roads.
Okay.
You know, so that they can take, the tractor will go there and their food and things will not rot. That's social intervention. When I hear them say we didn't do social intervention, how can infrastructure not be part of social intervention?
They feel that.
Let me give you one. Yeah.
National insurance scheme, LEAP.
Let me tell you. Of course, but we also had money. We were spending money in those areas. But let me give you three, you know, useful examples why infrastructure is also social intervention. If I did a chief's compound for a small community with oneness, right? One, school children, babies will have their vaccination and all those things, you know, at close proximity. Isn't that social intervention? Is that not what national health insurance is all about? And by building the infrastructure, you know, taking the delivery right to the village, to the person. Two, if I built cocoa roads, right, the women don't have to carry the load and walk bush path 3 miles, 4 miles to go and have their cocoa weighed, the men and the rest. And I know the experience because I grew on the cocoa farm and I carried when we were in school. Today there's a road going to my village in the western region. And so you can put that thing in a tractor and for just pittance. Those is the whole day is wasted in quotes. You know, walking that distance just to go and weigh your cocoa because you are in a village where there's no, you know, cocoa clerk as they call it. Yeah, but today, within 2 hours or an hour, you can just take a taxi trotro, you know, to go and. Isn't that social intervention? If I had, and the fact that my foodstuffs are not rotting, and therefore I can market them, you know, in the next big town, and I have more resources, how can this not contribute to social intervention? That is development. So and then finally, if you did even boreholes, and now that our water is being infested and all that, right, with a filter, is it not improving the health of the people? How can that not be social infrastructure? I'm sorry, but you know, understanding of some of these concepts is too mainstream.
Too mainstream?
Yeah, I mean, yes, our opponent's understanding of some of these things is too mainstream.
So infrastructure is at the core of a lot of the things you are attempted to do.
Precisely. Precisely. Do you understand the dignity? Do you understand the dignity of a child going back to Professor Mills, attending school where they don't have to run home when the rain is coming, in the rain belt? You know, where, you know, my grandfather used to have, and we still have cocoa farms there, and stop school, the rain stop schools. You are talking about 2 bundles of what? Roofing sheets. Keeping the child in the, you know, in the classroom. Sometimes they use thatch, yes. But the special school under trees is rare. For our city folks, it's rare. Right? And so if you do that, how about e-schools? Keeping the child close to home instead of going to a day school and sleeping on somebody's veranda, you know, out of proximity for a school that's close. So no, infrastructure has a lot of inherent social intervention. And if you don't see it that way, then you will not see the need for infrastructure.
Was that why that was your very first focus when we were looking at the free education policy? why you thought that the e-schools.
But there's a cost involved. Yes, the social aspect is part of it. Because every country, even if you had boarding schools spread all over the country, your Ivy Leagues will be a few. There will always be a few. And the majority of SHS kids will not go to Ivy Leagues. What they need to be able to compete when it comes to going to Ivy Leagues are good teachers, good schools, good laboratories, and the rest. So that's the first, and that's infrastructure. Secondly, if you want to implement, e-schools, and we said progressively fee-free education, I'll make 2 points. First of all, if you have it is a practice globally. It is a practice globally. Those of us who have relatives outside, if you have experiences, and those of us who have lived outside, they can tell me if I'm wrong. Secondary education is generally free in the advanced countries, but your child goes to the school defined by your zip code, by your house address. We can say by your zone, your district, or your constituency, or whatever. Yes. And therefore, there is a keenness by even the community, right, to make sure that those schools are working well, just like the mission schools and the rest. That you can go. I went to an experimental school in Somalia, but I managed to pass my common exams with excellence, right? Of course, I was to go to PSEC, which was a regret I couldn't go, right? And ended up being what? So there are community schools. And that is because most secondary schools are day schools. And so the child can go to school and come home. Of course, there are bursaries and scholarships for those who do well, who want to go to the Ivy Leagues and the rest, but that becomes more competitive. And that's even an inspiration for teachers to make sure that their awards also, get to those points. But my third point, we have just gone through progressively fee-free. The MPP did not award fee-free in year 1 for all secondary school students. They awarded it first for year 1 students. Year 2, 3 were paying fees. Then they added the year 1 going to year 2, benefited together with the one coming to year 1. Year 3 was paying fees. And then when it came time for those who started free SHS to reach year 3, that's when everybody, is it not progressive? Is it not progressive? And therefore, if you consider that approach, can you imagine if we had under our scheme, right? Let me be conservative. 100 e-schools completed. By the 3rd year, we would have had more intake.
You have had a greater intake of people.
Yes, and more quality for attending school in the communities. And I can predict that they wouldn't have been sleeping on verandas and parents hiring,
private teachers too.
Private teachers, and yes, they wouldn't have been double tracking and all those. And that's why President Mahama says when he comes, he's going to make sure that that's a priority to stop the double track.
Honorable, maybe we have to make time and talk a bit about the NDC manifesto, but you have already indicated that you have to leave. I think I've kept you for way too long. But thank you.
I haven't been here in a while, so for the sake of
thank you for passing
of the listeners who are used to
do you share the NDC's belief that you win the election?
I do, because our work is showing
that you win.
The work we did is showing clearly. Yeah, that's a vindication. Ghanaians have been, as the last topic we just discussed. It's not a matter of giving me money to go and vote. It's a matter of what did you do for me. And as I follow His Excellency, the issue of development is coming up. And that's the primary responsibility of every government.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for passing through. Honorable Seth Tekper is the former Minister for Finance and joined us here in the studio today. It's been long in coming, and it was a wonderful discussion dealing with you specifically on the issue of the economy. The economy, and that has been the song of the New Patriotic Party.
One word for advisors and everybody: don't forget rebasing when the Vice President talks.
Rebasing. Rebasing is key in your assessment.
It's the example we're giving is key because his analysis always goes to 2008 and it ignores all the rebasing that has been done.
Okay.
Which is like holding the cedi constant, holding inflation constant.
Okay.
No, that's why you use real numbers. So we shouldn't be taken by those analyses at all.
The Vice President is being simplistic, I guess.
The Vice President.
Then I go back to my 2 words.
The Vice President is comparing even a non-oil economy with an oil economy. They have been blessed. They should account for the blessing which Ghanaians gave them in an oil economy and not compare to the end of Kufuor administration.